Daniel Morales had worked as a janitor in the towering glass building for nearly 5 years. Every morning before sunrise, he arrived quietly, pushing his cleaning cart across the polished marble floors. While executives in sharp suits discussed million-dollar deals upstairs, Daniel focused on spotless windows and shining hallways. He was a humble man, raised in a small neighborhood where hard work meant survival. Though his uniform was simple and his name rarely remembered, he took pride in doing his job well. The executive floor was always the most intimidating part of the building. It was quieter, more luxurious, and carried an atmosphere of power. Framed awards lined the walls, and expensive artwork decorated the corridors. Daniel usually cleaned that floor in the early afternoon when meetings were in session. He preferred staying invisible, moving silently so he wouldn't disturb anyone important. That day, however, something unexpected happened. As Daniel was mopping near the entrance of the CEO's private office, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. He didn't look up immediately, assuming it was another executive passing through. But when he heard the distinct sound of high heels clicking confidently against the floor, he instinctively raised his eyes. It was her. Ms. Eleanor Hayes, the CEO of the entire corporation, stepped out of the elevator. She was known throughout the company for her intelligence, authority, and commanding presence. Dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, she walked with effortless confidence. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows reflected off the glass walls behind her, almost framing her like a spotlight. For a brief second, Daniel froze. He hadn't expected her to appear so suddenly. His glance, meant only to see who was approaching, lasted a moment longer than it should have. Realizing what it might look like, his heart began to race. He quickly lowered his gaze, his face burning with embarrassment. The last thing he ever wanted was to seem disrespectful. Daniel had always been careful. He kept his eyes down, avoided unnecessary attention, and spoke only when spoken to. Losing this job was not an option. He supported his mother and younger sister, working long hours without complaint. The idea that a simple misunderstanding could cost him everything filled him with fear. He focused intensely on the floor, pretending to be deeply occupied with his work. But he could feel it, the subtle pause in the air. The rhythm of the heels stopped. She had noticed. Silence stretched between them. Daniel swallowed hard, preparing himself for a reprimand, or worse, a call to security. His mind raced with apologies he might offer. It had been an accident, nothing more. He had meant no harm. Then, instead of anger or sharp words, he heard something unexpected. "Good afternoon," a calm, steady voice said. Daniel slowly looked up, surprised. Ms. Hayes was standing a few steps away, watching him, not with fury, but with curiosity. And in that brief, suspended moment, what began as an awkward misunderstanding was about to change both of their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Daniel's hands tightened around the handle of his mop as he slowly straightened his back. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure she could hear it. Ms. Eleanor Hayes stood before him, composed and unreadable. The executive floor, usually filled with distant murmurs and ringing phones, felt unnaturally silent. "Good afternoon," she repeated, her tone calm but firm. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Daniel replied quickly, lowering his eyes again. His voice trembled despite his effort to stay steady. He felt ashamed, convinced he had crossed a line without meaning to. There was a brief pause. Instead of walking past him or calling for assistance, Eleanor remained where she was. Daniel braced himself for criticism. "I noticed you seemed startled," she said carefully. "Is everything all right?" Her question caught him off guard. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't cold. It sounded genuinely curious. "Yes, ma'am. I'm very sorry," Daniel said immediately. "I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I was just cleaning and didn't expect anyone to come out of the elevator so suddenly." Eleanor studied him closely. His face was flushed red with embarrassment, and his eyes showed nothing but sincerity. There was no arrogance, no boldness, only a young man clearly afraid of making a mistake. Most employees she encountered behaved differently around her. They either tried too hard to impress her or avoided her entirely. Some looked at her with ambition, others with intimidation. But this was different. This was pure nervousness from someone who felt far beneath her position. She noticed the slight wear on his uniform sleeves and the careful way he stood, almost as if trying to take up less space. It was clear he was used to being invisible. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel, ma'am." Daniel Morales. How long have you worked here, Daniel? Almost 5 years. Eleanor raised an eyebrow slightly. 5 years. That meant he had been there long before she had taken over as CEO 3 years ago. Yet she had never noticed him before. The realization unsettled her more than the brief glance ever could. 5 years is a long time, she said thoughtfully. You must know this building better than most of us. A faint, shy smile appeared on Daniel's face. I suppose I do, ma'am. She found herself asking another question before she could stop herself. Do you enjoy your work? Daniel hesitated. He wasn't sure how honest he was allowed to be. I'm grateful for it, he answered carefully. It helps me support my family. There it was again, that sincerity. No complaints. No bitterness. Eleanor nodded slowly. There's nothing wrong with looking up once in a while, Daniel, she said, her voice softer now. Just make sure it's because you're aiming higher. Daniel looked at her, confused but intrigued by her words. For the first time, instead of feeling small under her gaze, he felt seen. And Eleanor, walking back toward her office, couldn't shake the feeling that this brief, awkward encounter was far from ordinary. Daniel stood frozen for a few seconds after Ms. Hayes turned toward her office. He assumed the moment was over. He picked up his mop again, trying to calm his racing thoughts. But just as he began moving the mop across the floor, he heard her voice once more. Daniel, do you have a few minutes? He looked up, surprised. Yes, ma'am. She gestured toward a small seating area near the large windows at the end of the corridor. It was a quiet corner executives sometimes used for informal discussions. Daniel hesitated for a split second. Janitors didn't usually sit there, but he carefully parked his cleaning cart against the wall and followed her. Eleanor sat down gracefully, crossing her legs, while Daniel remained standing until she motioned for him to take a seat. He sat stiffly on the edge of the chair, unsure of what was happening. I've been trying to understand something, she began. You've worked here 5 years. That shows loyalty. But I don't believe anyone dreams of becoming a janitor at a corporate office. So tell me, what did you dream of? The question caught him off guard. No executive had ever asked him anything personal before. Daniel looked down at his hands. I wanted to study engineering, he admitted quietly. I was accepted into a small college after high school. But my father passed away that same year. I had to start working full-time to help my mother and younger sister. Eleanor listened carefully, her expression softening. So you gave it up? For now, he replied quickly. Not forever. I still read books at night. I watch online lectures when I can. I don't want to forget what I learned. There was no self-pity in his voice, only determination. Eleanor leaned back slightly, studying him in a new light. She remembered her own early years. Before she became CEO, before the awards and recognition, she had been a scholarship student working part-time jobs to survive. She, too, had once felt invisible in rooms filled with powerful people. Why engineering? She asked. Daniel's eyes lit up for the first time. I like solving problems. I like understanding how things work. Machines, buildings, even systems inside companies. Everything has a structure. She smiled faintly. You sound like someone who already thinks like an engineer. He let out a nervous laugh. Maybe in another life. Eleanor shook her head slightly. No. In this one. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward anymore. It felt thoughtful. Meaningful. You know, she continued, this company has an employee development program. It's not widely talked about. It supports staff members who want to continue their education. Daniel blinked in disbelief. For someone like me. For someone dedicated, she corrected firmly. Titles don't determine potential. His chest tightened with emotion he wasn't prepared for. Hope. Real hope. I don't want special treatment, he said quickly. It wouldn't be, she replied. It would be an investment. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like his future wasn't just a distant dream. It felt possible. As Eleanor stood to return to her office, she realized something important. Leadership wasn't only about profits and strategies. Sometimes, it was about noticing the quiet people who kept everything running. And sometimes, all it took to change a life, was a conversation. The next morning, Daniel arrived at work earlier than usual. He barely slept the night before. His mind kept replaying the conversation with Ms. Hayes. Part of him wondered if he had imagined it. Executives didn't simply sit down and talk about dreams with janitors. It felt unreal. As he pushed his cleaning cart toward the supply closet, his supervisor approached him with a puzzled expression. "Daniel, the CEO's office requested you," he said. Daniel's stomach tightened. This was it. Maybe someone had misunderstood the situation. Maybe the conversation had been a test. He wiped his hands on his uniform and made his way to the executive floor, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. When he reached the large glass doors, the assistant outside the CEO's office gave him a polite nod and gestured for him to enter. Eleanor Hayes stood near the window, overlooking the city skyline. Morning light poured into the room, casting a calm glow across the modern office. She turned as he stepped inside. "Good morning, Daniel," she said warmly. "Good morning, ma'am," he replied, standing straight, unsure whether to sit. "Relax," she said gently. "You're not in trouble." He let out a small breath he hadn't realized he was holding. She motioned for him to take a seat at the conference table. In front of her was a folder with the company logo printed on it. She slid it across the table toward him. "I spoke with Human Resources last night," she began. "Our employee development program covers tuition assistance, flexible scheduling, and mentorship for staff members pursuing further education." Daniel stared at the folder but didn't touch it. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it seriously," she replied. "This isn't charity. It's recognition. You've shown loyalty and discipline. Those qualities matter." He slowly opened the folder. Inside were forms, brochures, and information about evening university partnerships. His hands trembled slightly as he read the words. "I can't afford university," he said quietly. "You won't have to do it alone," Eleanor responded. "The company will cover most of the cost. And I'll personally make sure your schedule allows you to attend classes." Daniel looked up, overwhelmed. "Why would you do this for me?" Eleanor paused before answering. "Because someone once gave me a chance when I needed it. And because leadership isn't about standing above others, it's about lifting them." Emotion tightened his throat. For years, he had worked silently, expecting nothing more than a steady paycheck. He never imagined someone at the top would see his potential. "I won't disappoint you," he said firmly. She smiled. "You're not doing this for me. You're doing it for yourself." As Daniel left the office, the city outside looked different, brighter somehow. The same floors needed cleaning. The same hallways waited to be polished. But everything had changed. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a student in the making. A future engineer. A man with direction. And all because one powerful woman chose curiosity over judgment, and opened a door that had once seemed permanently closed.